Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Since the endorsement of Peter Obi by former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo has brought about the question about the value of political endorsements as we head towards the presidential election. The ruling party, the All Progressives Congress, and the People's Democratic Party, PDP, have played down the endorsement, calling it irrelevant. Also, the presidential candidate of the African Action Congress, Omoyele Sowore, has described the endorsement of his counterpart in the Labour Party, Peter Obi, by President Olusegun Obasanjo as an endorsement of failure. Sowore described Obasanjo as an overrated Nigerian ruler who fetishized the ruination of Nigeria. He said rather than an Obasanjo's endorsement, he would rather be satisfied by the people's endorsement. Joining us on this show this morning to discuss his thoughts on the value of political endorsements is Omoyele Sowore, presidential candidate of African Action Congress, AAC. Welcome to the morning show, Sowore.
Thank you, Doctor. Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, same to you. Thank you for your... Well, the last time I checked, I mean, you must be a young man, you know, but look at those words you were using to describe former President Olusegun Obasanjo, a man who had been head of state, who was president twice, and you are saying his intervention is an endorsement of failure, that is fetishizing something. Are you aware that when all this is over, you will still come back to this Yoruba land?
No,
why are you so harsh?
No, I wasn't harsh. I have known the former president for as long as I've been conscious politically, which was in 1989. And you remember that in 1993, we had, before 1993, we had a tiff with him in the pro-democracy movement when he was aspiring to become the Secretary General of the United Nations. And we opposed him very, very violently. Not violently, but, you know, and it was because of his records when he was head of state in 1970, his tenure then ended in 1979. And we knew what he did. It was based on that record that we opposed him not to become the Secretary General of the United Nations. And in 1993, you saw what he did. In 1979, by the way, he was one of the people who made it impossible for one of the best candidates at that time, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, to become the president of Nigeria through, at the point, I think they had that two-third mathematics that made it impossible for him. And he's always been part of those who made it impossible for Nigeria to attain democracy. As early as 1993, he was part of the people that conspired with the military to say Abiola, who won an election, wasn't the messiah that was wanted for Nigeria. When he became head of state again, the president of Nigeria in 1999, by the end of his tenure, he didn't want to leave. So it is best to say that he's an embodiment of failure, because if he wasn't a failure, he wouldn't have been looking to endorse people, to be continuously trying to become politically relevant. The country would have been on autopilot by now. The country would be doing so well. He would have left the country for the young people. But these are the same people that told us in the 70s that we'll be leaders of tomorrow. This is 2023. Those who are supposed to be leaders of tomorrow are still being told who to vote for in an election. So I was just really, really pissed off, dissatisfied with this kind of godlike behavior on his part. If he could oppose Awolowo and come back to Yoruba land, if I oppose him, I should be free to come back to wherever land I decide to go back to after this election. If I win, I'll be everywhere. So I am just giving you historical facts so that you can understand that where I stand on this issue. I've always been opposed to him, not new. I might look young. I'm 51 years old. And that means we have about 40 years apart going by his age. But I've been part of the political process since the 90s.
But in Yoruba culture, you are not supposed to insult an elderly man.
Well, in Yoruba culture, there is a balance that is very popular, which is Omodegmo Agbagbon Lafida Ile-Ife. That is, an elder doesn't have monopoly of wisdom.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad that you've talked about this and also the cultural perspective of your responses to some of these issues around cultural respect. And a number of people have said that perhaps that is a challenge in the political climate of Nigeria, where young people are suppressed under the guise of culture.
Yes.
So don't speak out against an elder, and so you see what is not right and you're asked to keep quiet. But away from that, do you think that, I mean, some people have described sometimes your responses and reactions as being very, almost violent, so very, very intense. Is there a better way to doing this? And the second thing I'd like to still speak to, perhaps for you to just again talk about the value of an endorsement. Are you saying that you don't want anyone to endorse you? I know you've said only the Nigerian people, but would you be, I mean, the Northern Group had just endorsed you a few weeks back. It was reported. Are you saying you're not interested in any endorsements? Is there value in endorsements?
I'm interested in alliances, and people can be endorsed without having to denigrate themselves. And my own position in this particular case is that I don't need the endorsement of those who ruined Nigeria, and I'm very clear about it. I'm not going to go to the home of a former president who destroyed this country to say, hey, please endorse me so that I can be like you. No. The kind of endorsement I want, like I've said, is from the people. Let the people decide who their leaders should be. And people who are on the departure lounge of life, technically, should not be dictating the future of young people whose future is at stake, especially when they've done everything possible to ensure that young people like myself don't grow in this country to become who we should be. And I don't want that to continue with the generation that is coming and whatever generation that would follow that. So that's my position on this. So like you said, we use culture when it's convenient for us to suppress, voices. But don't forget that the same Obasanjo has always been opposed to anything he doesn't like. It doesn't matter whether you're older than him or younger than him. There are times he had issues with people who were older than him. There were times he had issues with people who were younger than him, like Fayose. There was a time they almost came to blows in somebody's house. So, but this issue here is not about culture. It's about the survival of the Nigerian people. And that's more important to me than the side conversation about culture, because 2023 for me is necessary turning point for the country if you don't want to tip over. So, yes.
Okay, so I've got two things, and I'm happy you talked about tip over. Mm-hmm. I just made a tweet out this morning. I said, dear future president of Nigeria, please remember that as you come in, if you're sworn in on May 29, you will have a 77 trillion naira debt.
Yes.
How would you fix it? That's the first question. Secondly, what is this romance you are having, or some people are beginning to say it's hanky-panky, you are having with PRP? Because the PRP has a presidential candidate called Abiola. And there's this alliance that anywhere you see PRP, you vote for AAC or you... I mean, what's going on? Because a lot of people say it's nebulous. Is that Kola Abiola have to step down for you at some point, or you step down for Kola Abiola? What is happening?
You see, the PRP has two factions. That's the truth. Just like the AAC had two factions at the point. But the faction that we're in alliance with is the PRP Vanguard. That's the original PRP that was founded by Aminu Kano. I think in 1978. And that party was taken over by Balarabe Musa. So the Abiola faction is not the one we're involved with. They reached out to us, this PRP Vanguard, that they want to be in alliance with us. And we met with them in Kano and sealed it. So it doesn't take away from them the originality that another faction recognized by INEC has an Abiola. I don't think that by virtue of my struggle for the Abiola family, that Kola Abiola should actually be struggling with me for the position of presidency. Because when his father was encumbered in the annulment of the election, we did the fighting. Whereas Kola Abiola, he will be watching me in a parabel. Someone will tell him they were all having a good time. And that's the truth in this country. As a matter of fact, he was dating Babangida's daughter when his father was enmeshed in the annulment of the election. When the father died, we had to fight in their house, almost physically, myself, Kola, and Deji, when they brought police to flush us out of the compound because they wanted the regime to come and pay homage to the Abiola that they killed. And we said no. So we stood in large numbers at Abiola's house. So what I'm saying is that it's not that he's not entitled to be president, but I'm also entitled to be in alliance with organizations and groups that have indicated interest in the quality of our candidacy.
So how do they vote? Do they vote AAC? Because obviously
They will vote AAC, yes.
So that's what you're saying.
Yes.
They will vote AAC,
They will
and they're
vote.
giving you that confirmation, and it's not going to be anti-party activity on
No,
their
they
part.
are not in that party as recognized by INEC.
Okay.
Are you getting my point?
77 trillion naira debt is on ground for you.
I have the same position.
it?
So, as president, I'm going to pause repayment of debts until I audit the debts. That's what I'll do first and foremost when I'm sworn in. I'm not repaying any debt until the audits are properly done, and because we need the money to fix the country. But Buhari has borrowed Nigeria back to the Stone Age. Everybody has agreed on that. But our problem is not debt to GDP ratio. Our problem is debt to revenue ratio. And the revenue will aggressively increase. When we get comfortable, I've discussed this several times, including on these shows, and I've identified several other revenue sources that either have been hidden or are not being harnessed the way they should be. I've identified taxes that are owed to Nigerian states. That's up to about 4.5 billion. I said this on Rise TV by oil companies, and those are low-hanging fruits. We have identified about 11 trillion naira of revenue-generating government agencies that are not remitted to the federal government purse. We have identified monies that could come from the NLNG, the Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas Company. That's over $5 billion that is not remitted directly to the federal. It's remitted through the NNPC, and the NNPC just quaff the money. So I've identified several other products that can get into the international market at this time, including products like sorghum. There are a lot of mineral resources that have been sold under the table that we've identified that can be brought into the official and formal processes. That will give you a lot of money. Somebody was just fighting over stamp duties. Said it's 89 trillion. I don't think it's up to 89 trillion, but there's a sizable amount of money there. And I've confirmed this with agencies that are involved in financial investigations, that there's money there, but it's hanging around with the banks that are connected to the CBN governor.
Well, I'm surprised to hear that some government ministries, departments, and agencies still keep multiple accounts that are unknown to the government. Because under the Jonathan administration and also the Buhari administration, the whole idea of IPs, the whole idea of a single treasury account was to eliminate all these hidden accounts. So, but if that is the case, then of course, that must be an area of interest for a future government. But you were talking, let me take you back to President Obasanjo's statement. That his statement, you were saying, you should leave this thing for young people. But that his statement was directed at young people.
It's not directed at young people.
No, the title specifically says young Nigerians.
Look, there's a difference between...
No, let me just give you the summary.
Or patronizing them to do your bidding.
No. He was talking about young Nigerians taking charge of their own future. Yeah. And even Peter Obi, whom recommended, Peter Obi is still, I guess, just about 60 or thereabouts. So within the framework, he will also be considered a young person. And he cited the fact that he himself, the first time he was head of state, he was a young man.
That's right.
And, even he cited General Gowon, who became head of state at 37. And so that his statement was really an expression of support for young people. But before you joined us on this program, this is the question I want to ask you. Rotu Zodire, who was in charge of the African business segment, said we should ask you about subsidy. Because in this 2023 budget that the Minister of Finance tried to break down yesterday, 3.36 trillion has been put together for subsidy till May 29. And from June 2023, that subsidy will go. But Rotu said, you are on record as having said you will keep the subsidy. Where will the money come from in this deficit budget that the next president will inherit?
Well, let me quickly also answer your Obasanjo question quickly, which is that he cares to care about young people this time around, but you forgot that in 1989 he wasn't young. In 1999 he wasn't young, but he accepted to be president. If he cared about young people, he would not have been gunning for third term by 2007 when his tenure officially ended. So just understand these tricks and you will not fall for them so easily. So going to 3.3, I mean the subsidy, you see, you cannot just pull the plug from underneath people in a country who are vulnerable. But my position on subsidy is that, honestly, is there subsidy? No. Yes. What they parade as subsidy is how the cabal, the economic cabal in the system has figured out how to get themselves paid for jobs not done. We were part of the people that fought the Jonathan regime over subsidy. When we were fighting that struggle, we were told clearly that the subsidy is no longer needed because
the Jonathan government was not a regime, it was an administration.
Okay, whatever you want to call it. But to us, we are entitled to define the government as we see. But whatever it is, they said there was no need for subsidy anymore. But when that struggle got to the peak, the administration, the Jonathan administration, was forced to find out that those who were collecting subsidy were not delivering fuel to Nigerians. In fact, we found out in one of the cases that one of the barges claimed to be bringing subsidized fuel to Nigeria had sunk 20 years before. All these guys were hauled before courts. None of the cases, to my knowledge, has reached conviction till today. So those of us who have that experience of the lies that have been told to cover up subsidy or the existence of subsidy, have now found out that it's a lie that is told from time to time. But let's go away from that lie and look at the realistic issues of refineries that ought to be fixed. And before you say, well, government has no business in refineries, if government has no business in fixing its own refineries, what business does the government have in investing $2.5 billion in a private refinery built in Lagos by Dangote and cannot fix his own refinery? Because if we fix our own refineries, we will have availability of these products. But the other part is that the only product that is subsidized, according to them today, is gasoline, petrol. Diesel is not subsidized. How come we are not getting any effect from that unsubsidized product? Kerosene is not subsidized. The Jet A1 fuel is not subsidized. All those products from which they have removed subsidy, what benefit are you getting from it? Nothing. We are supposed to be saving plenty of money from diesel. But you can't, not only can you not find diesel as you want these days, but the price keeps fluctuating on a daily basis. So if you remove the so-called subsidy without any plan to support the poor in the country, that means petrol will go to 1,000 naira and you are paying slave wages of 30,000 naira per month. How do people survive in this country? That's the question we should be asking. Government should not exist to make life miserable for the citizens. It should exist to find solutions to problems that are afflicting the populace. And that's what we are saying, that's what we stand for. So that they will stop deceiving you every year. Where were the university when they wanted to remove subsidy under Babangida's regime? They said, oh, after we remove the subsidy, we'll use it to buy vehicles for you. They bought vehicles for the Nigerian Labour Congress, they bought some vehicles for students, but it didn't solve the problem. Because these vehicles were substandard vehicles, supplied by their friends. And after a few months, those palliatives had disappeared. Government should not exist for palliatives. It should exist for concrete leadership that will bring about developments, planned development. That's what we're saying. That when you keep hearing these tired arguments about how to govern Nigeria to raise revenue, it makes you want to puke when you know otherwise, especially for those of us who are exposed, when you know otherwise that's how countries are governed. I was in this country detained for 3 years. I said it on his show as well. I couldn't leave. But the US government was sending me palliative checks over COVID, 3 of them. I wasn't even there. And when I got out of detention, I said, no, I don't want this money. They said, no, you're entitled to it.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Meanwhile, people are stealing palliatives here, government officials.
Sorry to interrupt you. We're here with Omoyele Sowore, presidential candidate, African Action Congress, yes. AAC. Yes. So, Sowore, if you could just summarize your thoughts about how you will keep the subsidy and how there is no subsidy. Many Nigerians will be happy with that because Rotus, who brought up the matter in his segment, said many Nigerians don't want to pay more for fuel.
That's right. And they shouldn't pay more for fuel because fuel should be their right. Every country, amongst all the 6 foremost oil-producing countries in the world, are giving the best to their citizens. Norway has some of the best welfare system for their citizens, free education, free healthcare. You go to the UAE, where all our leaders rush to for vacation and where they hide their wealth, particularly Dubai. If you want to have a wedding, the government will pay for it. If you want to have a funeral, they'll come to your compound and ensure it is done. They'll send you to school for free at home and abroad. Nigeria is probably the only country that is, at this level of oil producing stage that is punishing its citizens with the lie of oil subsidy. And I've said it's broken it down. Why there are no subsidies is because subsidy itself is a fraud, and nobody has disagreed with this. What has not happened is to have a leadership in place that can check the fraud. Buhari once said it when he was running for office that he knew there's no subsidy, and he made himself the Minister of Petroleum Resources. And I keep saying, if you are really hungry for ministerial position, why don't you go for tourism? So that we know that it's not because of the lucrative nature of that position. But the most important thing is that when you look at how the business of subsidy is done and who are involved, those who are involved, so many of the companies that are involved in the subsidy thing in Nigeria, they are scammers. They've been proven to be scammers. So many of them are facing international sanctions, especially those in Switzerland and other places. They have been made to pay huge fines to the US government, where they are not even doing the kind of business they are doing in Nigeria. Individuals here, you just need to list out their names. You will discover that this is all a fraud. It doesn't matter, even when you remove the so-called subsidy, they will figure out a strategy again to come back and say that they still need more. They are holding the country by the jugular. And until you remove their hands from it and have the country control its resources, by which way, I also mentioned on that show, that I will nationalize the NNPC.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you. So let's talk about your, if you do become the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We have painted the picture of the economy, just using the budgets as well as a yardstick as to what the next president should expect. You're looking to inheriting a next to nothing treasury. However, we have 133 million Nigerians who are living in multidimensional poverty. We have a double-digit inflation rate. We don't have unemployment figures, but the last was about over 30%. So Nigerians are looking for a leader who is capable of prospering the lot of the nation as well as the people.
Yes.
What are your immediate plans for the Nigerian people, particularly with regards to the poverty levels in Nigeria?
Well, the immediates are not just going to be one in nature. We have to have a range of policy interventions that are interacting. And I've said it, and I'll say it here again. You cannot have an economy that's working without electricity. That is elementary. There is no country in the world that's ever industrialized and prospered without power, energy. The industrial revolution everybody talks about came through, steam engine. So you're in darkness and you want to prosper, you are wasting your time. So that will be priority for me. And secondly, the issue of security will also be major priority. Investment in education.
So the how is what I'd like you to speak
the
to.
how is what I also described earlier, is to find out where to get the money to carry out your policies that are immediate in nature. I'm not the kind of president I will go out there and say, wait for 100 days. Nigeria doesn't even have 100 days from the beginning of May 29 to start kickstarting an economy that's working. And I've identified to you things that are ways that I will figure out how to get money immediately and start investing locally to ensure that we kickstart an economy that works for people. I will also not retain the slave wages that they are paying to workers, because it doesn't motivate workers when you pay them 30,000 naira that can't take them home. Some people can't even live on 30,000 naira per day buying recharge cards alone. So why would you be paying your workers below average wage and expect production in the country or productivity? So these things have to interact, to make sure that the country is kickstarted. But what is most important is also leadership that's able to act immediately. I'm not going to be president that takes 6 months to set up a cabinet. I will have a cabinet ready to go, and I would have hired very competent hands, because the president of a country is also the human resources officer of that country. That's what leadership means. You can't do everything together, but I'll be up and running. And you could argue in my favor that I probably would be the fittest president in the history of this country. If when I become the president, I would have been one of the persons who is better educated than most of the president. You know, Dr. Abati had a PhD holder as president, but you know, in their days, I used to question if the man has a PhD. But that's an argument for another day. It depended on how he performed. So, but let's just say that you are arriving with, you know, troops to fix every part of the economy, every part of social life, every part of the economy, I mean, education, you know, healthcare. And when you come with those policies and they start interacting immediately, and they are driven likely by technology, you will find out, you wake up the next day and be wondering, was I in Nigeria yesterday? Okay. Because this is a new Nigeria today now. Okay. And that's the new day that I want all of us to wake up to when I become president in 2029. We should stop promoting people who have been tested and have failed this country consistently.
Two things.
Yes.
With the new Finance Act, the tax burden for businesses in Nigeria will go up to about 36%. What would you do about taxes? Because people complain it's stifling them. Secondly, what would you do about big business? And thirdly, what would you do to integrate a very polarized nation?
So, with regards to tax, I'm not going to increase taxes. And what we should do...
Would you reduce tax from this 36% corporate income tax?
Yes.
Okay,
because
to which...
My interest would be
to what percentage would you reduce taxes
My interest is to get a tax to GDP rate that is consistent with at least Africa. Right now, I think we're about 7.5%. I may not be correct, but we should push that to about 15%. Make sure people are paying taxes that they should be paying. I mentioned earlier, oil companies that are owing taxes. You can't get that kind of laxity in countries that are functioning. So, and you make sure that you eliminate taxes, tax waivers and grants that are given to companies that are already doing too well. You know, over 16 trillion taxes granted to about 5 people in Nigeria. It's unfair and unjust and criminal, as far as I'm concerned. That should go to the people. So if we have a tax collection spread that takes us to 15% or 20%, consistent with global standard, you will have more than enough money. Are you getting my point? So you don't need to overtax people, because that's in itself is a disincentive for businesses or even savings. So, and this is why I question all the economists that come here or come on TV, and they keep repeating the same thing. You know, they will just go and copy and paste what they have heard in other countries without looking at the circumstances governing the tax policies of those countries. I live in the US for 20 years. When my income was less than the minimum, about the minimum wage, when I pay taxes, I get all the taxes back at the end of the year. There's no repayment of tax. Even your VAT here, you're supposed to return VAT to whomever paid the taxes when they're leaving, at the end of the year. But here we just quaff everything, and we have no explanation to give to people for why we are irresponsible like that. And I want to say something about taxes. Government in Nigeria is not ready to collect taxes. Do you know why? If you collect taxes from people, they will ask you questions. So they depend on the freebies from the oil industry or wherever they can get the freebies from, because they don't like being questioned.
But they're ready now because they're increasing taxes. So what work are you going to do as regards, integrating a polarized nation?
Justice.
Unfortunately, we don't have time. Yeah. We have to go. Well, we don't have a finance act yet. What we have is a finance bill. It's not been signed. Okay, and manufacturers.
I'm glad it won't be signed by the time I get there.
Manufacturers are angry that the tax burden will be too heavy.
Who is still manufacturing in this country?
The major problem is tax administration.
Yes.
What they do with the taxes that they collect, and they need to expand the tax net. But somebody sent a question. Yes. There's no time for you to answer that. Is to say how do countries where they don't have subsidy, how do the people cope? If you are saying you will not remove a subsidy, but you already gave very detailed explanation. So thank you very much, Sowore.
Thank you for having me.
We'll take a short break now.